My wife cheated on me with our neighbor and then aggressively sued me for $250, $0 in our divorce over a disputed inheritance while secretly hiding she's been stealing from our joint account. I never saw it coming. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating. But there I was, staring at her phone screen, feeling like my world was collapsing. It all started with little things. Late nights she claimed were work, sneaky texts she'd hide when I walked into the room, and her sudden obsession with her phone that she refused to let me see. But I didn't want to believe it. I loved Sarah. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. We had a nice house, decent jobs, 2 kids I adored, and a life I thought was solid. So when the signs started piling up, I told myself I was overreacting. Still, deep down, I knew something was wrong. It all came to a head one Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I noticed her phone blinking with a new message. I normally wouldn't have looked, but something about the tone of the notification made me pause. I glanced at it and my stomach dropped. The message was from someone named Mike, and it said, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Been thinking about last night." Last night, I hadn't even known she was out that evening. My heart started pounding. Who was Mike? And what had they done last night? I felt this strange mix of anger and confusion. I didn't even know who this guy was, but the way she responded to him, it was flirtatious, intimate. Wasn't just casual texting. It was obvious they'd been seeing each other maybe for a while. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I spent the next few days watching her, noticing small things, her nervous glances at her phone, her quick change of subject when I asked where she'd been. I started checking her social media, and sure enough, there were pictures of her with Mike, smiling, holding hands, even a few from a dinner they'd had recently. She lied about being at her sister's house that weekend. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep this went. She'd been sneaking around, hiding a whole secret life. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was ongoing. That's when I decided I had to confront her. I needed answers, and I needed to know how long this had been going on. I waited until she came home from work, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I pulled her aside in the bedroom and I showed her the messages. Her face twisted into a sneer and she rolled her eyes like I was wasting her time. "It's nothing," she snapped. "Just some guy from work. We're just friends." That's when she started lying, saying I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that she was tired of me accusing her of cheating when she was doing everything for this family. But I knew better. I saw the truth in her eyes. She was guilty and she didn't want to admit it. The shock hit me hard. I'd always thought we had a good marriage. Sure, we argued sometimes, but who does? I never suspected she'd betray me like this. It felt like a punch in the gut, like someone had taken a knife and twisted it inside my chest. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry all at once. How could she do this to me, to us? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind or stupid. But the truth was, she'd been planning this behind my back for months. I was just too stupid or too trusting to see it. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, trying to piece everything together, trying to understand how someone I loved and trusted could do this to me. The pain was almost unbearable, and I knew this was only the beginning of a long, dark road ahead. The days that followed that confrontation were a blur of confusion and rage. I couldn't focus on anything else. Every time I looked at her, I saw the lies, the betrayal, the sneer she gave me when I accused her. I kept replaying that moment in my head, wondering how I had missed all the signs. How had I been so blind? It was like she had been living a double life right under my nose, and I was the fool who never saw it coming. Sarah, my wife, she's always been a bit of a bitch. She's the type who can be charming when she wants something, but she's also manipulative, quick to lie, and often dismissive of my feelings. She's always been good at hiding her true nature behind a veneer of sweetness, but I knew her well enough to see the cracks. Still, I never thought she'd cheat on me with the neighbor of all people. That neighbor, Mark, is a guy who lives just a few houses down, a guy I trusted initially. I'd had beers with him, talked about our kids, shared some barbecues. Turns out, he was the one she was sneaking around with. It made me sick. Once I had the evidence, I started digging deeper. I wanted to know just how long this had been going on. I started checking bank statements, emails, and even her social media activity. That's when I found out she'd been secretly siphoning money from our joint account. It was subtle at first, small transactions here and there, a few $100s, nothing that would raise suspicion. But over time, the amount grew. She was stealing hundreds, sometimes thousands, and hiding it in a separate account she'd opened under a fake name. I never saw it coming. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. The worst part was that she was lying about everything. She insisted she was innocent, that she was only trying to make a life for herself, that I was just paranoid and controlling. She called me obsessive and crazy when I confronted her about the money. She even had the nerve to say that I was overreacting and that she loved me, but she just needed freedom from the constraints of our marriage. Yeah, right. That's what she told me when she was sneaking around with Mark, probably during late nights when I thought she was working late. I felt like a fool, like I'd been played. And then there was the inheritance issue. Out of nowhere, she started a lawsuit against me for $250, $0 over some disputed inheritance we supposedly had. She claimed I'd been hiding assets and that I was trying to cheat her out of her fair share. The thing is, I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd always been transparent about our finances. But suddenly, she was filing papers, making demands, acting like she was the victim. She even hired a lawyer and started aggressively pushing the case, all while secretly stealing from our account and sleeping with the neighbor. It was like a perfect storm of betrayal. I felt my blood boil. How could she be so manipulative, so ruthless? I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. The betrayal cut so deep I was afraid I wouldn't survive it. I'd always thought I was the one holding our marriage together, but it turned out she'd been planning her escape for months. She'd lied, stolen, and betrayed me in ways I never imagined possible. I was furious, but I also felt hopeless, like I was drowning in a sea of lies and deception. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I knew my life was about to change forever. After everything I discovered, the affair, the theft, the legal fight over the inheritance, I knew I couldn't stay silent. My mind was racing, trying to figure out my next move. I couldn't let her get away with this, not without a fight. I decided I needed to fight fire with fire, but I also needed to be smart about it. I couldn't just blow up my entire life without a plan. So I started gathering evidence, not just of her cheating and stealing, but also of her lies, her manipulations, and her attempts to corner me legally over the inheritance. I hired a private investigator, someone I knew from work who owed me a favor, and he started digging into her activities, her financials, and her contacts. Meanwhile, Sarah kept pushing her narrative, acting like the innocent victim, crying about how I was controlling and paranoid. She'd lie right to my face, telling me she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt our family. The more she lied, the more I saw through her. I could see her trying to spin the story, but I had enough proof now to take her down. The financial records, the messages with Mark, the emails about her legal threats, they all painted a clear picture. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do. One night I decided to confront her again, this time with everything laid out on the table. I told her I knew about her affair, her theft, and her legal schemes. I told her I documented everything, and I was going to use it all to protect myself and our kids. Her reaction was a mix of anger, denial, and that bitchy sneer she always wore when she was caught. She spun a new story, said I was stalking her, that I was crazy, that she was only talking to Mark because I was abusive and controlling. She even accused me of trying to ruin her reputation, which was laughable considering how much she was already destroying ours. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I'd always thought I was a decent guy, honest, committed, and here I was discovering I'd been played for a fool. I couldn't believe she'd do this to me, to our family. It was like waking up in some nightmare I couldn't escape. The pain was intense, but I also felt a strange sense of liberation. I finally saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd been using me and everyone around her for her own gain. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let her keep pulling the strings. I reached out to a lawyer, started preparing for a divorce, and made plans to get full custody of the kids. I also decided I would expose her for what she really was, an unfaithful, greedy, deceitful woman who had no regard for our marriage or our family. I knew this was going to get messy, and I was ready for the fight. I wanted her to know that I was done playing nice, and I was going to do everything in my power to protect myself and my children from her lies and schemes. The next couple of weeks were chaos. She doubled down, trying to manipulate the situation, making threats and even attempting to turn the kids against me. But I stayed calm, documented everything, and kept my lawyer in the loop. I knew I had the upper hand, and I was determined to end her reign of deceit. Honestly, I've never felt so betrayed in my life. It's like I was living with a stranger all these years, and now I was finally seeing her true face. I just hope I can get through this, rebuild my life, and somehow find a way to trust again. The legal process moved quickly once I had all my evidence in order. I filed for divorce, and the fight over custody and finances became intense. Sarah's lawyer tried to spin her side, claiming I was the one manipulating and controlling her, but I had everything documented: texts, bank statements, the emails, even the private investigators' reports. It was clear she'd been lying about everything, and I wasn't going down without a fight. The court saw through her manipulations pretty fast, especially once I laid out the evidence of her affair with Mark and her theft from our joint account. During this period, she kept up the charade of being the innocent victim, crying and yelling, trying to make me look like the bad guy. She accused me of being possessive and abusive, which was laughable considering how she'd been sneaking around, stealing, and planning her escape. I stayed calm, let my lawyer handle most of the communication, and focused on protecting my kids and my reputation. I knew her game. She was trying to paint herself as the wronged wife, but her actions spoke volumes. The more she lied, the more it became obvious she was the one who'd been cheating and stealing all along. The custody battle was brutal. She tried to manipulate the kids, playing the victim and telling them I was mean and controlling. But I had evidence of her lying to me, sneaking around, and even her attempts to hide money. The court wasn't stupid. They saw her for what she was. I managed to get full custody of the kids with supervised visits for her, which she hated. That was a small victory, but it felt huge in the moment. I wanted her to see that her lies and schemes wouldn't get her anywhere. I also demanded she pay back the stolen money, which she initially, but the evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, the divorce settlement was another. She kept trying to sue me over the inheritance, claiming I'd been hiding assets. I had all the proof that she'd been siphoning money, and I brought it to court. It was a mess, but I knew I had the upper hand. I also made sure to get a restraining order against her because her behavior was becoming increasingly aggressive and unpredictable. She'd show up at my house unannounced, yelled at me in front of the kids, and even tried to intimidate my family. I couldn't let her keep doing that. Looking back, I realized how much she'd been planning her exit for a long time. The affair, the theft, the legal attacks, all part of her scheme to leave with as much as she could while destroying me in the process. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that I was finally free from her manipulations, and anger that I'd let her get so far. But I also felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was standing my ground, protecting what mattered most: my children and my sanity. I realized I'd been a fool to trust her so blindly, but I also learned a lot about human nature and the importance of being vigilant. That period was exhausting, emotionally and mentally. I was drained, but I knew I had to keep going. I kept reminding myself that I was doing this for my kids, for myself. The truth was finally coming out, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The betrayal had shattered me at first, but now I was picking up the pieces, ready to rebuild from the ashes. The worst was behind me, I thought, but I knew the repercussions would linger. Still, I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing I'd fought for my life and my family, and I'd won. The final stretch of this nightmare played out over the next few months, and I'll admit, it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through. The court proceedings, the endless lawyer meetings, the emotional of seeing her try to manipulate everyone. Sometimes I wondered if I'd ever get my life back. But despite all of that, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, her schemes were exposed, and I was finally free from her web of lies. One of the most satisfying moments was when the judge awarded full custody of the kids to me. Sarah had fought hard, trying to convince everyone she was the wronged wife, but her actions spoke louder than words. Her affair, her theft, her attempts to manipulate the legal system, they all backfired. The judge saw through her, and I saw a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could start healing. I also secured a substantial financial settlement, which included reimbursement for the stolen money and a fair division of assets. Sarah's attempts to sue me over the inheritance were dismissed outright once the court saw the evidence of her theft and deception. The aftermath was a strange mixture of relief and anger. I was relieved that I'd protected my kids, my assets, and myself from her manipulations. But I was also angry that someone I loved and trusted could turn into such a ruthless, selfish person. I felt betrayed on every level, and it took a lot of therapy and time to start trusting again. I realized I'd been naive, but I also learned that sometimes people aren't who they seem, and you have to be prepared to fight for your life and your family. In the end, I decided to cut all ties with her. She moved out of the house, and I focused on rebuilding my life from scratch. I started seeing a counselor, worked on my self-esteem, and poured myself into my kids. They needed stability, and I was determined to give it to them. I also cut off all contact with Sarah. She was too dangerous to have around. Sometimes I wonder what her life is like now, if she ever regrets what she did or if she's just moved on to the next scheme. Honestly, I don't care anymore. What matters is that I survived and I came out the other side stronger. Looking back, I realize how much this experience has changed me. I used to be trusting and naive, but now I understand the importance of being vigilant. People can hide a lot behind a pretty face or a kind word. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what's yours. I don't regret exposing her lies, even if it meant going through hell. It was necessary. I want others to know that if you're in a similar situation, discovered betrayal, theft, and manipulation, you can fight back. It's not easy and it's going to hurt, but you're stronger than you think. Never let anyone steal your peace, your family, or your dignity. Stand your ground, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to take the fight to them. Because in the end, honesty and integrity will always win, even if it takes time. Now that I've finally reached the end of this ordeal, I look back and realize how much I've learned about trust, about human nature, and about myself. I used to think that if you loved someone, you could overlook the small signs of trouble, that honesty and loyalty were just part of a good marriage. But I was wrong. Sometimes, the people closest to you can betray you in ways you never expected, and when they do, you have to be ready to fight for what's rightfully yours. Losing my wife was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. Seeing her manipulate, lie, and steal from us was a gut punch that I thought would break me. But I also discovered a resilience I didn't know I had. I learned that protecting my kids, my reputation, and my own sanity was worth every sleepless night, every legal battle, and every moment of heartbreak. The betrayal hurt more than I can put into words, but it also pushed me to become stronger, wiser, and more cautious about who I trust. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this: don't ignore the signs. If your gut tells you something's wrong, listen to it. Keep your eyes open, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight for your rights. Sometimes, you have to go to war to protect your peace. And no matter how much it hurts, remember that you are not. There are people out there who will support you, and even in the darkest moments, there's a chance to rebuild and start over. I've learned that forgiveness isn't always about the other person. Sometimes it's about forgiving yourself for trusting too much, for thinking people are better than they really are. I've come to accept that sometimes betrayal is a gift in disguise. It shows you who you really are and what you're capable of overcoming. I still have scars, but they're a testament to my strength, not my weakness. Today, I focus on my kids, my own happiness, and the hope that I'll never be like this again. I want to believe in love, but I know now to be cautious. Trust is earned, not given freely. And I've learned that the most important thing in life is to protect what's yours, your family, your integrity, and your peace of mind. Because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters.